very much, Kevin. Thanks everyone for joining me in the first session. It's been a while since I've done something in person, so it's nice to see so many 3D people in the room. I guess before we get started, I just have to remind myself, but take a minute to put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Research has shown that if we run to time, we're likely to get interrupted over 8 times just during this presentation, and 3 or 4 of those will be self-imposed by you finding something to click on a red dot on your phone. So take a minute to turn that off. Research has also shown it takes us 23 minutes to get back into focus after we get interrupted. Session's only 25 minutes long, so the maths are not going to work out for us this morning. So hopefully you're in the right place. We're going to talk about how to save a meaningful amount of time for an organization by fixing broken internal communications and then happening to use Microsoft Teams and the rest of Microsoft 365 to do that for us. So why should you listen to me? I've spent 15 years in the drinks industry, including fast-moving consumer goods bit of that, in a variety of roles. I started as a finance business partner many years ago, more years ago than I care to admit, partnering all the different functions, so supply chain, marketing, sales. Then moved into logistics and did a couple of demand management roles, including like total business process redesign, so integrated business planning, implemented SAP and a trade promotions management system. But my last job there, which has a snazzily titled transformation manager, so I worked directly for the sales director, and he just had a hunch that we're spending too much time on internal stuff and not enough time with customers. And so this whole program of work that we then kicked off resulted in saving 3 hours per person per week, not the 4 that is in the title, for the whole of the UK multifunctional selling team, and decreased after hours work by 30%. And because we had the data, which I'll touch on a little bit, we knew that we had loads more to go at. So hopefully what we can do today is just show you what we ultimately did and how you can start to go on that journey yourself as well. Last bits on me, I've got a YouTube channel that's doing okay, and when I'm speaking to prospect clients, I like to say I've got 2 million reasons why I know that organizations are not doing enough to upskill their people in the technology they already pay for. Also now a consultant and a coach with founding MeTime will help organizations do pretty much the same thing I'm going to take you guys through, so helping with a business focused rather than an IT approach. So, as we go through today, we don't have much time to get through everything, so that's why I'm talking a little bit quickly. But hopefully, let's ground ourselves in some things that we can use to navigate through the next 25 minutes. So first one, if you're a normal person doing a normal job trying to get something done to add value to your organization, you do not care about technology. You only care what it can do for you. So you either want it to help you get stuff out of the way and just work, or you want it to actively help you do your job better. So I work with a lot of business people, not IT people, and the inner anguish of not knowing how to use something or when to use it, or just the complexity of the apps that we've got now and the spread of different apps that you could possibly use is a real burden on people's jobs at best. At worst, they're just like, well, I don't know, I just won't do it, I'll do what I used to do before. So we need to be spending some time on upskilling our people on how to use technology. We know from research, and Microsoft do a lot of research with Harvard Business Review, that most knowledge workers' time is collaboration. So I think like 80% of people's time, if they're a knowledge worker, is spent in a collaboration. And for the companies that I work with, that is still predominantly going to be emails and meetings, even post-pandemic. So yeah, most people have probably used Teams already, but that's predominantly used for video calling and chat, which sort of as we go through, hopefully we'll see is going to sort of perpetuate silos and working in an inefficient manner, faster usually if you haven't got any thought about how you're using it. So stealing people's commute and having video calls from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. now isn't helping make people's lives easier. So, but we can use the same tools to make people's lives easier. Last thing I just want to ground us in is thinking about change. All change is marketing, and all marketing is change. Coca-Cola are really good at influencing your behavior so that when you see it on the shelf, you really want to buy it, or at least you know it exists. when we think about change internally, we usually forget all of the good stuff that we know about marketing for decades. So we need to think about being marketeers when we think of change our organisations internally. So, just to summarise, we should put some resource behind using technology to make people's lives easier. We know where to direct our effort to free up the most amount of time for the least amount of effort. And if we want to be serious about well-being, which a lot of organisations are right now, we need to be serious about time saving first. Because if people haven't got time, they haven't got time to do the nice stuff. And putting a foosball table in probably isn't going to help. Last bit, we need to change people's default behaviour in an engaging way, not just sending out more emails about what the IT project team is doing, which no one really cares about. Cool, so hopefully we've ground that we need to do something. What should we do? We know that people are wasting time. What usually goes wrong when people try to do something to address it or try to use a project to get more out of Microsoft 365? So for a lot of companies I see, at least, most will have tried Teams already. Most have been forced or rushed onto it because of the pandemic, and therefore only really bothered about video calling because people just needed to get a base level of functionality done. But in my opinion, that's 10%, about 10% of what Teams is really for, in my opinion. So if you think about the Teams bit of Teams, or the Teams and channels, people have either locked it down completely, so no one can make a team, and IT have got something in place where people can't make their own teams, and therefore people are using video calling and chat and think that's all there is to Teams. Or the opposite, everything's open, anyone can make a team in the whole organisation, and then there's a complete spread of teams across the organisation, loads of silos, and everyone that is going to create their own team usually creates it for their own team of people. Microsoft's not helping us out with when we talk about teams of people and teams of Microsoft teams, but they're usually quite small teams, and the result is the same, whichever camp you're in. People operate in silos, you don't get the best out of the tool, and you think that's all they can do. So hopefully we'll try and address some of those as we go through today. You might skip Teams and jump straight to automation because Microsoft has got loads of automation tools for free or for cheap as part of your subscription model, and some companies go straight to that because they think that's going to save the most amount of time and the most amount of resource. If you haven't got a strong base of change that shows you've got people's best interest at heart, that can massively freak people out, so the destroy all humans picture at the top. The flip side is, sometimes you go to some organisations, flip to automation first, and then it's completely benign because you automate back office processes that are never going to add value to the company. You're making efficient something that doesn't actually do anything for the company. So it doesn't reduce cost and it's never going to add any value. You might jump to using the SharePoint bit of Microsoft 365 and redoing your intranet and thinking about tech company news and sharing information that way. And then that usually is sort of top down and therefore locked down. So there's no like peer way, excuse me, that people can get information on the intranet, in my experience, which then just leads people to go back into email. So if a senior manager wants to send out communication and there's a barrier to entry to get it on the intranet, so it's got to go through a comms person or some IT person's got to do something they don't have access to, they're just going to go and send a blanket email out. So it's sort of not engaging and just usually ends up then the person at the bottom, there's no one way to have a communication across the organisation. People just end up with sticky notes all over their face. So the manager might be sending stuff on WhatsApp, on email, on Teams chat, on Telegram, there's some bits on the internet, it's just all over the place. So same thing as with files. If you haven't thought about it up front, you can end up with stuff everywhere. And then last bit, I'm still surprised. I just started working through a new referral partner where they've done their bit and they're doing some managed services. They stop at the point that their licenses are turned on and have got nothing thought about in terms of change, which is fine because that's where I can help them out with, but they've not even got that in the project plan for their client to think about. So I'm still surprised that people haven't got change as part of their sort of project plan. So turning on, thinking job done, doesn't really help us these days. And then also heard people say that we train, or school trains people how to use Outlook, Excel, Word. We don't train them. That's not what we do. The big, obvious sticking point with that is technology is moving so fast. It's certainly different to when I left school. Just like driving a car, when I learned to drive, there wasn't even a mobile phone. Just driving a car now, or you need to use a mobile phone, is a different experience than when it was before. So we know we need to do something. We know what usually goes wrong. So what should we do? A good starting point, especially when you're talking to the business end of an organisation, is to start with some data. So I don't expect you to read all of this. This is a slide that was presented to the Microsoft Workplace Analytics community at the time. It's now called Viva Insights. If you don't pay for Viva Insights now, it's so cheap for the amount of value you get back. I would just get it. If you've got an organisation of 100 people or more, then just pay for it, turn it on, get some insights back. So this is what we used when we first did our sort of corporate program. We used Microsoft Workplace Analytics and just to see how we were working internally, which started to flesh out some really interesting bits. So as you would expect, the higher up the organisation you go, you spend more time at work. So senior managers working longer hours generally than managers or professional grades. And you would expect them to spend more time in meetings than lower grades. But the way that they're doing that, one, they're having a greater percentage of low-quality meetings, so they're interrupting themselves, they're multitasking, they're overlaying meetings so no one knows whether they're going to turn up or not, and also they're fragmenting their day down into two small chunks that haven't got time to think. So that's the exact opposite of what we want for our senior managers. We want to free them up times that they have got more time to be strategic and add value to the organisation. And then similarly, the bottom section is where we're sort of overlaying, well, are we spending time with the right customers? So we would expect to spend more time collaborating externally with our highest value customers, which you can see in the top right of this bottom chart here. But the anomaly in this sort of second highest value customer to us, we're spending as much time as someone much further down. We should be spending more time with that customer. Similarly, when we look across function, you can see that demand management is spending a lot more time collaborating with our customers than our sales force, which doesn't seem right unless there's a massive issue with supply chain. So there's loads of information you get from Viva. The main bit, if you just turn it on and don't do any of those sort of Power BI reports, is just showing you how much time people are spending in emails and meetings at headline level. And I have not seen a IT provider provide this for any other one that I work with, so I thought it might be nice to show you a little shortcut to get at least the same headline data for free without getting Microsoft Viva Insights. If you go into Admin Center, look at your 90-day reports, get the number of emails sent and times it by 5 minutes, the number of emails read and times it by 2.5 minutes, sum up both of those, divide by 13 weeks, assuming you've got the 90-day version, divided by the total number of employees, you've got the email hours per person per week, which is usually, even if you know how much time people spend doing that, is a surprise when you show that back to management. At least gives you, a basis of like, wow, this is a lot of time we're spending in emails. Similarly for meetings, it's a bit less accurate just because the data you can get for free, but take the number of meetings from Admin Center, you can guesstimate the average meeting length because it's got like a nice little graph about, the number of people that spend in each length of meeting. Divide that by 13 weeks, total number of employees, get meeting hours per person, and if you want to turn that into pound notes to make someone really pay attention, get both of those, times it by $75 an hour. Why $75 an hour? Because that's the default in Workplace Analytics, and Microsoft must have done some research to show that that is a good average to use, weighted by the seniority and being fully costed for pensions and everything. Times it by 45 weeks, assuming UK holidays, and the number of employees, and then you get the value per annum spent in emails and meetings. And then to land what we started with at the headline slide, if you just even don't do all of that and think, well, there's a realistic ability to save 4 hours per person per week. For every 100 people, that's about £1 million a year of value to an organisation. again, the data is a good start. What do you then do with it? So now I'm a consultant and outside my corporate role. Every consultant needs a Venn diagram, so I had to come up with one, and here's my one. So the first thing that I would suggest creating is a digital equivalent of an open plan office. So this is the antidote to Zoom fatigue, constant back-to-back meetings, too many emails. This is the Teams bit of Teams, so Teams and channels, to create an open plan equivalent of a well-designed office space. So open plan meaning that it's a larger structure than you would likely get set up if you left people to their own devices. And well-designed to mean that each area has got a purpose, a use, and everyone knows where to go for everything in their job, and every interaction with anyone else that they need to do their job, every file they need, every piece of information. So tech-wise, this is team structure, channel structure, and file structure, but all conceived together with the end in mind, assuming you haven't got anything else. So you're going to be ditching all your old SharePoint sites, all the on-premise share drives, thinking this is the way that we're going to work just in this structure. Getting this right makes everything else easy or irrelevant further down the line. So without this piece, you end up with stuff everywhere, fractured communications, and you make things worse by adding yet another thing to look at and keep up to date with, versus this is now the place that we do all of our work internally. So without this bit, it's like having a physical office, a new physical office, right next door to your old physical office. But you haven't moved everything over. No one knows who's in each building, and no one knows whether the filing cabinets are in the old one or the new one, where to leave the document, that memo, which building are the meeting actions in. So getting this right first eliminates all of that confusion for the people that just need to do a normal job in your organization. So how do you get them to start using the new structure? Same principles, but how do you get them into the physical office? How do you get them into the digital office? So you could do it through mandates and just say, well, if you don't use this new way, I'm going to sack you. I like to do a softer approach and focus on, well, give them a reason to use it. So there's lots of chat about how to get people into the physical office. Give them a reason to go back in the office. If you put a meeting in that's a really nice, good meeting that they need to go to, they'll come back into the office, and in person is always better. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be in this room. So getting specific about what problem we're fixing. So why are we doing anything? What's the problem we're trying to solve specifically at an organizational level for each department, for each team, for each individual? What's in it for them? More simply, how am I making your life easier? If we can't answer that question, we're going to be doing a lot of effort for no result. Last bit, cultural clarity. So the last missing piece, I like the Seth Godin definition of culture, which is people like us do things like this. When I was doing my training, I used to hear it as the way things are done around here, but that implies that we can't change it. People like us do things like this implies that we've got an ability to enact change ourselves. So how can we identify other people like us? How do we change how do things like this? How can we get more people like us over time? So when we're planning out our change, we want to focus on habitual change, so people like us doing things like this consistently. So when we plan it out, it's things like looking at the adoption curve, power roles, who's delivering the message, what behaviours do senior leaders need to exhibit, who's going to hold people to account to the fundamental basics, which everything else is going to fall apart. My results mechanism I take clients through is based on this. Again, I don't expect you to read it, but it's 3 cultural changes done in this order for a reason, and I would recommend doing the same thing if you want to get the same results. So it's working out on the open first. It's one place for everything, increasing productivity and decreasing stress. Only then we start to move on to like getting things done. So starting to think about using the sort of project management and task management, sorting out the meetings, and then getting on to automation. So we want to reduce micromanagement, remove busy work, and empower your employees. And then once we've freed up people's time to do some more of the nice to-dos or more well-being stuff, then we focus on the community. And all of this is done in the same structure we set up in the teams, because teams, when you set up a team, it sets up so many assets in the background for you that just getting that simplified will help everything else. So how to enact those 3 cultural changes. I guess I've been at talks before and looked at some advice, and usually get senior buy-in, do some end-user training, communicate what's going on in the project, get some champions, and then hand over. And none of that is bad advice. You definitely need to do all those things. I've got a lot of friends in the Army and the military forces, bizarrely, and they would say, well, if you just operate at the tactical level, you can be winning the battles and then lose the war. And that's exactly what I see when people try to do this sort of project, because it's not really a project, it's ongoing, it's an area of things that you need to constantly keep doing. And so a lot of what people miss is then there's nothing to guide them, so there's nothing above the tactics to keep you doing all of that work. So it's like 3 example principles, just saying, well, we want one place for everything is a really nice guiding principle to simplify our tech structure. Streamlining for value and not cost reduction helps people not freak out and think that you're going to take their jobs away when you're moving on to automation. Increasing well-being is something obviously a lot of employees in an organisation get behind. Having some clear goals to underpin those principles, like we want all files in Teams, is quite clear that we then don't want things saved outside. 0 internal email, we're using Teams for internal and email for external. No large or long meetings, and ultimately saving 4 hours per person per week are some clear goals that people could get behind. And then the other bit that's missing from the tactics is then the operational level. So what building blocks are we going to do? What are the smallest bits of activity that's going to keep everything above it a good base? So usually habits. So the stupid, simple things like training people to use app mentions effectively can be the single thing that kills or makes the entire change thing work. Because if people just turn off the notifications and opt out, then that's when people just revert back to what they were doing before. Similarly, when you're communicating things both as part of the project of what's going on and as part of the company communications, it's like training people to think in direct marketing that's been going on the internet for quite a while. People then forget when they do internal comms. So what's the hook? What's the outcome? What's the call to action? People have just you think you've only got your organisational communications. You haven't. It's like everything's bombarding people on their phones. Why are they even going to read something that's been sent out internally? We need to get them to take notice straight away. And then the last bit, which is relatively obvious, is how we're going to reward people for the good behaviour and stop them from doing the bad behaviour. So there needs to be something linked to their appraisal. I think we don't have time. This is a real example. It's a current client's recommendations, and just an example of where we're layering in all of these changes. So the open working in Teams, the bottom level intranet, they had a knowledge management problem, which is what I was brought in to help with. It turns out their entire organisation is knowledge because they're a non-profit climate change think tank. And so we're going to do a trial of Viva Topics. I guess all the top bits sort of linked to technology. There's loads of other things we need to do as part of this change. So helping out them sort out their top level meeting structure, decision matrices, thinking about their whole organisational structure, meeting behaviours, training after that, trying to get their project management office done. So you can see it starts to evolve into, this is not just a tech thing. It's like we're linking technology and process and culture as entire cultural change that we need to do to help make people's lives easier. So that's my approach. It works. I've helped a lot of organisations through this change. It's business focused. I don't usually work with IT, and it's trying to be value accretive, not focused on cost reduction, which obviously is a lot easier to change when people aren't scared about losing their jobs. So if you're even relatively interested in this topic, it's quite difficult to hit everyone's position in a 25-minute conference. So if you want some other time, I'm around the conference. If you want to grab me and chat through some stuff, that's fine. I also offer some free 45-minute modern working clarity calls, which are very snappy titles. You can just have a chat. At some point when we're both free, you can either take a little QR code if you're being fancy, or just type in metimeservices.com/call and book in a time where we can go through some bits for your organisation a bit more specifically if that is of interest to you. I think that's bang on time, so don't know if we've got any time for questions. But if we don't, then just grab me as we go through. If we do, if Kevin says that's okay, he's the boss, so just shout out, I guess.
Any questions? Ben here is set up, I'm sure he'll wait. You get to catch the big buzzboard, needs to be unmuted.
Yeah, you get to speak on here. Yeah.
That was great, thank you. So I noticed on the slide, one of the things that you say is the target of 0 meetings. I think about a client at the moment, and when I look at their calendars, it's wall-to-wall meetings. And when I think about what they do in there, they could just be sharing that and not having a meeting about it. How do you get people out of those just telling everyone what they're doing type meetings? How do you get them out of that to be doing something more creative and productive?
Yeah, so I guess that's the 3 steps. So we're setting up a place where they can do things asynchronously, a place where they can opt in or opt out of as much information they want, so you can put stuff on there for info. It's not like an email where you have to decide who's going to receive it or not first, and then think about the meeting life cycle. So what are you having that meeting? Could it just be in a Teams channel? What's the purpose of it? You know, all the other stuff that's not related to technology, and sort of there's now a place where you could remove the meeting. So whereas before, if you remove the meeting, it would turn into an email, which might be worse. At least now you're removing the email, it's turning into a Teams channel, sort of threaded conversation, which is a lot easier to keep up to speed with.
Yeah. Well, I saw that, I was picturing like a structured way that it's doing. I'm thinking maybe little components in where people put their updates into this one structured part of the chat and then people can respond to it. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
I have to wrap you up a little bit there. If you wanted to continue the chat, then please do grab Gavin afterwards. Otherwise, a huge round of applause. I really enjoyed that. So thank you.